Talk about money. I just had a interesting dollar bill with the star. It just means that I believe it means that it was reprinted. Uh, I want to talk about money because it's pretty important in people's lives, right? It's an aspect of life, modern life, for sure. So after reading Ray Dalio's Changing World Order, and of course, and watching his videos on principles, and also listening to just the kind of like pondering about the Federal Reserve, money creation, reading or listening to Debt, right, 5,000 Years by David Graeber, right, listening to all these things, right, watching all these things, the history of currency, right, Roman currency, Chinese paper money, right, Venetian money changers, right, all these things, Babylonian debt and interest rates. After listening to all these things, the history, the institutions, the psychology, what I came to realize really, well, first of all, money is kind of more like it's like an IOU almost. It's kind of like trust, but before you trust someone, it's like a form of, it's almost like a form of belief about the future, right? You believe that the money will still have that value in the future. Ooh, there's something in my. Ooh, that was a good burp. But there's still a belief about money having value in the future, right? It's like a IOU. And cultures have had that for pretty much forever. But the big thing, right, big invention came with like interest rates, right? Usury, as the Christians called them, right? Usury, interest rates. Well, that's when things started getting dicey, right? Because if you have debt and if you can pay off the interest rates, you're fine, right? If you can grow your money faster than the interest rate grows, you're fine, right? You're good. But the moment interest rates get higher than your growth, you're screwed, right? You can't pay it back, right? And so that's why, whether it was the Babylonians or it might have been someone else, right, invented Jubilee, right, which is the cancellation of all debt. They needed to do that, right, to have a clean slate so that the economy didn't grind to a halt, right? If there was more interest, right, interest rates on debt than actual growth, right, the whole system would just collapse, right? You can't, there's no way to possibly pay back that interest rate on the debt, right? If the money doesn't grow as fast as the interest rate, right? Well, if the economy doesn't grow as fast as the interest rates. Right, so that's why somebody, somewhere invented Jubilee, right, canceling all debt. But in our modern era, we don't have Jubilees, right? We don't have Jubilees. So how do we deal with, right, interest rates, right? Okay, so this comes to Ray Dalio's, Changing World Order. So once a country, nation, empire, you name it, right? Once the state becomes a world power, a global power, right? Once it becomes number one globally, it has the privilege, basically, of holding the reserve currency of the world, right? Whatever that is, right? Whether it's dollar, pound, guilder, it doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter. Whoever is the strongest country then. Right now, it's the U.S. Right? For now. But back then, of course, it was the British Empire. Before that, the Dutch. Before that, um, it might have been the Spanish, Portuguese. Right before that, the Chinese Yuan dynasty. And then it just keeps going, right? It just keeps going. Now the point is, if you have reserve currency status, pretty much, as mentioned in Ray Dalio's book, there's only like 3-4 choices you really have, right? You can either, right, if you have a lot of debt, You can either reduce spending, right? Pay off the debt as much as possible, which is very unpopular, right? Or you can print a lot of money if you're the reserve currency, right? If you're the reserve currency, right? If you're that country, then you can print money, right? Every other country can't print money. Only you can, right? The reserve country can. Reserve currency country can. Or you can default, right? But default is the last option, right? No one wants to default because that would reduce trust, right? It would basically, you're basically like, it's like economic suicide, basically, right? If you default. So, no, realistically, there's only two options, right? Reducing consumption, right, and paying the debt, or printing money. And what's always going to happen? You always print money, right? Always. No one wants to reduce spending, so you always print more money. But then what happens then? Well, pretty much since if you're the reserve currency country, you kind of get used to that, right? You get so used to it, you spend more and more and more, right? You accumulate more and more and more. You consume more and more and more. What does that mean, though? It means that you're less able to pay back that debt, right? You're less and less and less able to pay back that debt, right? Because of all that consumption, right? It's production versus consumption, right? Supply versus demand, right? If you have more growth in the interest rate, you're fine. But the moment you have more, but the moment the interest rates are higher than your growth, you're done, right? Mathematically, you can't pay it off, right? It's impossible to pay it off, right? So that's why we have this like growth economy, right? This growth, unlimited growth at all expenses, right? But of course, there's other costs associated with it, right? If we try to grow things unlimitedly, right, that doesn't happen, right? It just doesn't happen. Why? Because there's, certain limits, right? For example, finite resources, right? We don't have infinite oil. We don't have infinite gold. We don't have infinite any resource, right? Which is why we can't have unlimited growth, which is why it has to slow down, right? It has to, right? Just like the seasons, it has to slow down, right? Some seasons it's more growth, some seasons it's less growth, right? Or to put it in health context, right? A healthy growth, right, would be like puberty, right? You're growing, right? And it's healthy if you're in puberty, right? But an unhealthy growth is cancerous, right? That's cancer. Cancer is unhealthy growth, right? So there's healthy and unhealthy growth. Now, so when it comes to printing, right? You print a lot of money, but then you devalue the currency, right? So then now there's a catch-22, basically, right? And America right now, because of all its debt, it's in a catch-22, right? Between a rock and a hard place, right? A catch-22. It's either, right? It only really has three options. One is to basically halt the whole economy, right? To reduce the debt burden as much as possible, right? Pay it off as much as possible, but that'll crash the economy, right? Because we have so much debt, it'll crash the economy trying to pay that back. Or we can try to print our way out of this, right? But that would devalue the currency, right? Because of inflation. So we can either destroy the economy, save the currency, or destroy the currency, save the economy. We can't save both, right? We can't. Because of all this debt. So we can save the currency or save the economy, but we can't do both, right? What's the third option? Really, the third option is to default. That's not going to happen, right? It's just not going to happen. Why? Because you lose all the confidence, the trust in the financial system, right? That's like economic suicide. It's not going to happen, right? Default is like the last option, right? So then what's the fourth, the final, the secret option? War. That's why wars happen, right? It happened during World War II because of all these economic pressures, right? The Weimar Republic, right? Nationalism, Japan having currency and financial trouble, Britain having financial troubles, right? France having financial troubles, America, Great Depression. Because of all these economic turmoil, right? Inflation, stagflation, well, not stag, but low employment, stock market crash, right? Because of economic crises, we had World War II. Right? No, that's not the only reason. That's not the only reason, but it's one big reason. It's because of the economic crisis that we had World War II, one big reason. And now we're going to the same thing, right? America has so much debt, it either has to, right, hyperinflate, right? Basically, it has to devalue the currency, destroy the economy, default, or go to war, right, to restructure debt. So just as an example, hypothetically, right, this isn't, I'm not talking about a real world, right? Let's say hypothetically, America owes 10 trillion to China, right? Let's say, and then China owes 0 to America. Hypothetically. Then, right, for China, right, China doesn't want America to default, right? Because that would be terrible, right? China gave us all this free stuff, and now we say, nah, I'm not paying you, right? That's completely unfair, right? But to America, that's so much debt, right? It's like impossible to pay, right? That's so much debt, it's impossible to pay, right? So, it's stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? It's a catch-22, right? Both parties are screwed. So what do? You go to war, right? You go to war to settle this, right? America can't pay back its debts, right? And China can't collect on its debts. What do? You go to war, right? That's the only option. And we've seen it time and time again. World War II, parts of the Napoleonic War, not all of it, right? But we saw it with Britain and France, right? The financial and banking systems. We've seen it time and time again. It's not the only reason. Right? Economics isn't the only reason, right? There's oil, water, food shortages, of course, right? But beyond that, economic crises are a big factor for wars happening. And so, it's where, I hope there's a fifth option, no defaulting, or devaluing currency, or destroying the economy, or war. Right? War would be the worst. But mathematically, I don't see any other way, right? There's just no other way besides a jubilee, right? But then jubilee would, of course, be like everyone defaulting, right? A jubilee would be everyone defaulting. Jubilee is probably the fifth option, right? And maybe we should have a jubilee. Maybe, just maybe, we should be thinking about it.